Everyone, I call this meeting of the Governance Committee to order. We'll start with a roll call. Councillor Tabor,
Here.
Councillor Lombardi.
Here.
And Assistant Mayor Kelly is joining us on Zoom. Here. All right, and I'm Councillor Cook, and I am here. And we have,
Good morning.
good morning. We have legal counsel joining us, Attorney Farini, and we also have our Director of Planning and Sustainability here this morning. So did everyone have an opportunity to review and approve the minutes of the February 10th, 2025 meeting?
So moved. Second.
Are there any changes, comments? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, the minutes are approved. We have a report back today. The Assistant Mayor Kelly had asked for this on the sidewalk obstruction fees historically that we have collected and the action of the fee committee. I'm going to share the sidewalk fees for everyone to see. And everyone should have received these in their email, but here they are in case we did not. I will try to enlarge that and scroll as needed. Let me see if I can make that a little bigger so everyone can see the whole thing. There we go. And I don't know, as far as the fee study committee, Councillor Tabor, do you mind reporting back on what happened at fee study?
Well, I told fee committee, which is Josh Denton, me, and Beth Moreau, about our discussion. And the assistant mayor pays the sidewalk obstruction fees at her own business and felt that they were fair and reasonable, and the city would be giving up revenue to let go of them. And that prompted the discussion that led us to ask how much revenue is involved. Then I reported the other point of view, primarily advocated by Councillor Cook, that this is by having low fees or no fees, we could be encouraging more sidewalk dining and only, and again, only for the tables, the A-frames, other obstructions, still, there should be, we all felt there should be a cost to be borne for those, for obstructing the sidewalks. And at the end of the day, the fee committee felt that this was a fee that we should waive in order to encourage more use of the sidewalks, but with the stipulation that that only occurs if your cafe table is open to anyone, not just your business. So that's where we ended up.
Okay. Okay. And the fee study committee will be reporting back to the council on March the 3rd. Is that what we're anticipating?
Yes, that's correct. But there was a strong feeling on the part of Councillor Moreau and Councillor Denton that it's good for the downtown, it's good for business, and probably better administratively not to have to bother with these. And the small amount of revenue at risk made it an easier decision.
Okay. And for those at home, hopefully you can see this, the small amount of revenue that Councillor Tabor is discussing, $8,705 last year. That was for tables, chairs, A-frames, signs, planters, and other items. So it's really a very small amount of revenue that we collect every year in this area.
But you would still be things like A-frames and advertising.
Absolutely, sure. Those are serving.
Do you have an idea of what part of that is, how that's divided? I mean, it doesn't really matter that much, but I'd just be interested because it is a small amount of money, so.
I know Suzanne has joined us, and I know she was working with finance. I don't know that we were able to break that figure down, Suzanne, were we?
The answer is, we probably could break it down, but it would take a little bit of time to break it down, because we'd have to do it manually. There's no quick report that we can run to do that, so we'd have to look back through the number of permits. So if that is wanted, I can work with the clerk's office to do that, and finance. Clerk's office, as you know, is still down a person, so I was respectful of their time to dedicate to this. But we can do it, it just may take a week or two.
I would say that the amount of money does not worth the staff time.
Right, we might expend more staff time on tracking this down. I would spend more money tracking it down than the cost associated
Yeah.
with it.
There's a
So,
cost for getting information, so it has to be worth it.
yeah, so,
I think the good news is, as we continue to automate more of our permitting processes through View Permit, that will help us be able to run these reports very efficiently in a way that we can't do right now, but we hope to do. So,
Thank you.
yes, thank you also for getting us this reporting back. I really appreciate it. And Councilor Tabor, thank you for reporting out the results of the fee study committee. Governance does not have a role. I think I should clarify that for everyone watching. Governance does not have a role in setting fees or determining fees or making the recommendations on where fees are charged or not charged. The fee study committee does that. So thank you, Councilor Tabor, for taking our input back to fee study, but those recommendations come from them to the council, so.
I have a process question. In the report back from fee committee, because the budget's not going to be passed likely till June, that withdraws the fee for the tables and chairs. Would it be appropriate for you, Councilor Tabor, to bring forward a motion to waive those fees? As you might remember, you are also having third reading for the amendments that this committee put forward on fees, which has language that says the city council may approve fees, on not just through the budget process, but on an as-needs basis. The way the agenda sets up, that comes first. So if that passes third reading on the 3rd, then it
Sure.
might be tidy if you could make a motion to waive the fees, because
Okay.
when do they, I think, Peter, they start putting in
First for outdoor
applications?
dining.
And March 1st for, I think, table and
Applications.
chairs, yeah.
Yeah, the applications come in March, but the dining
So we need
starts.
to do that.
Okay, well, I'll put something forward. Maybe I can get some help from legal, just writing the motion.
Sure.
Thank you, Councilor Tabor.
Yeah, and we could probably also have the payment in lieu fee as a second item under my name, because that's coming up from housing.
A lot going on.
That's good. I mean, that means the committees are doing their jobs.
That's right. There's just a lot of work happening in committee. And on this committee today, we're going to talk about outdoor dining design standards. I have for you, those design standards were in your packet. And so I will bring those up for everyone to see at home. And we also have, I have the ordinance pulled up in case we need to discuss anything that was actually in the ordinance. So here are the design standards. And I think we started with, we had some questions around implementation last year and some of the challenges. And Attorney Freeney has been collecting kind of some of the challenges that we had last year and where we need to address maybe potentially some changes. Attorney Freeney, do you have anything to
Well, I guess I'd like to go back to the first document.
Okay.
There's more information on there that I just had
Oh,
questions
here,
about.
back to sidewalk cost. Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
In terms of, outdoor dining, were there fewer restaurants? It's a significant change, so,
There were fewer restaurants. I don't have the numbers, I didn't bring the numbers with me, but there were fewer restaurants and the fees were a little bit less.
and the fees were less, I understand that. And then the parking numbers. You know, opportunity cost, 128,005.5, and then down to 77,000.4. I guess my question is, that is looked at as a revenue loss, but doesn't that parking go to the garage? And so, I mean, so those numbers are a little misleading in terms of loss, I would say. And that was my only comment on that.
Thank you,
Yes.
Councilor Lombardi. I think that's a good thing to point out, that sometimes in our numbers, the numbers you're seeing are the amount that would be earned in those 21 spaces. It does not take into account the offset that people will still be parking, but just parking in another space. So, you know, we can't measure the number of people who choose not to come park. That's a very challenging,
Right.
would be a challenging number to try to collect. So,
But there's experience, you know, in 2020, when we had to shut down for COVID. Once we got outdoor dining up and running for the summer season, we might have lost some individual parking space revenue, but our gross parking revenues perform much better than the cities and towns around us in terms of the percentage drop. So it did go to the garage, it went to other, you know, right up to capacity on the other meters.
so I've been regularly surprised at how our parking revenue continues to increase. So, you know, showing that people are still coming downtown and parking, and at a higher level each year it's very interesting to see those numbers. I think that this year will be even more interesting, and I think Councilor Lombardi has some experiences with this with the Economic Development Commission, but we've seen some decline in revenues for businesses and restaurants, and so seeing if the parking revenues reflect that, if we see also a decline in the number of visits. So that'll be very interesting to watch. Hopefully we don't continue down that path.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry to
No.
interrupt your
No.
process there.
No, that's okay. Sorry to have cut you off unintentionally there. I didn't mean to cut you off so quickly. We will go back to outdoor dining design standards, and Attorney Farini had been collecting comments from businesses that have dealt with this or from neighboring businesses about some of the challenges, and I don't know how many of those apply to the standards or versus the ordinance in application, but maybe you can help guide us through where we need to consider changes.
Sure. You know, from the legal department's perspective, and what we hear, and things bubble up when they're, you know, usually in conflict to the fourth floor, we did not get any calls about outdoor dining. The only issue that really came up was the one that you've just addressed, which is the offset for those several restaurants in town that had the outdoor tables and chairs and also the outdoor dining. And what do we do as far as offsetting those particular costs? That definitely was something that came up to the fourth floor. So, but you've already addressed that one, which seemed to be pretty pressing. I know the other thing, there was some issue on, you know, removal and collection, and that was more of a DPW, but I can report that we did not assess any fines or anything. We were able to work with folks and get those things resolved. So I think passing the ordinance that had clear direction and clear standards was helpful, but certainly want to thank our DPW folks and our enforcement folks for helping along. It's never perfect. People don't always vacate timely. We had to make a couple of calls, but we did not assess the fines because, again, we're trying to this was a new ordinance, and we were able to work with everyone. As far as the actual designs, umbrellas and all of that, we did not hear anything on the fourth floor, but I'll bounce it over to the Director of Planning and Sustainability, who they manage the overall permits. And so I think if there were some comments from applicants, you may have heard them, you may
There
not
wasn't
have.
many. We didn't, really, the only one that was raised is really that conflict in overlapping payments with the tables and chairs and outdoor dining. But for the most part, everybody really was compliant. They got their applications are always draggle in a little bit late sometimes, which can be a challenge for DPW, where if they have them all at once, they can go out in groups, and they kind of have to go out a little more frequently than they might like. But overall, it seemed to work pretty well. The new rule about not dining in the street seemed to work pretty well. We didn't get a lot of pushback from places. There was definitely some negotiation, or not negotiation, but just understanding of what the new rules were as they submitted applications. But I think we were pretty pleased with how it turned out and the number. It would be nice to, I think, if we can keep it. It was pretty similar to the year before, but there were a few specific changes. It'd be nice to have it go forward and stay without too many changes. I think that helps people get into a rhythm of what they're going to be expecting every year, and helps us on the enforcement and implementation side.
Thank you. Counselors, and
I
Assistant
thought
Mayor?
things are pretty good. I don't see any place where I would change them.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm not a restaurant owner, so,
Well, I think a lot of them have by now, this is their fourth or fifth year, they've made the capital investments. They just pull it out of storage.
These are all the design guidelines, so everyone at home can see them. These are available on the city's website. I think that's important for everyone to remember, too. The only complaint I heard, and I don't know if this is something that how we can fix this, but the complaint I heard was that people put out flower boxes and then didn't plant any flowers. So it just looked like this funny, empty flower boxes. So it didn't look like they were consistent with other businesses downtown that had them. Is there a way to, enforce that? I know that is here in the barrier section, I believe. No, where they're allowed to have. Basically, we say they're allowed to have flower boxes, not that they're required to have them. But if they do have them, that they should plant them.
So we heard this comment, Jane heard it, I guess, and brought it to me, and I guess the way I heard it was they weren't maintaining their planters, so I was thinking the plants were being put in and they died because they weren't being maintained, but it sounds like they weren't even planting them too. So we may have to tweak this a little bit, but we have an approach that I think will work pretty well to address what you're looking for. Maybe we've changed the language a little bit because it still hasn't gone out to the public. But in the application process, you submit for outdoor dining application online in our OpenGov permit system, which used to be Viewpoint. And people have to go through and click check boxes that makes them, read the statement, and then they click that they agree. And what we thought, we had a section that talks about applicant, this was already in there, applicant agrees the area shall be maintained in a clean sanitary condition at all times, and all garbage shall be contained at all times in covered receptacles. At the close of business, the area shall be left in clean condition, and all ground debris shall be swept up and disposed of. Applicant acknowledges that washing debris, materials into the city's storm drains and sewer lines is expressly forbidden. So this kind of is the maintenance of the site that we have in there. This helps us on enforcement, where we can go back and say, this is what you agreed to when you submitted your application. If you're making a mess, we can ask them to clean it up based on this. So what we thought we'd do is add another step, and we may have to change the language, but here's what we did so far is applicant agrees to maintain all plants and vegetation and planters in their outdoor encumbrance area. So basically saying if you're going to put plants in, you have to maintain them, but it doesn't say that you have to put plants in if you have a planter. So we might want to change that language to say if a planter is installed, applicant agrees to maintain all vegetation and planters. So if that seems like that works to satisfy what you're looking for, I think that's a good way to handle it. Rather than changing our design guidelines, we can do it right in the application, because it's certainly something that we wanted and are anticipated to do, and it gives us better enforcement capability if we say, look, you checked the box. You got a planter, there's no plants in it, why don't you just take the planter away? Or your plants died, why don't you replant it, or, start watering them better or something. So it gives us a little more teeth on the enforcement side.
Jason Page can do plant patrol.
Well, it's challenging because people think that the barriers are so ugly. So the goal, I think, is to beautify these concrete barriers by putting planters on them and some plants. And so, yes. Assistant Mayor Kelly.
Thank you, Councilor Cook. I do want to say one of the things I think we have to be cautious about, and a little bit of a grace, and this is why I would agree with going with Peter's recommendation, is that flower boxes are the easiest things to vandalize for outdoor dining. I know like my business and several other of our flower pots that we invested, a couple $100s in, were vandalized several times through the season. So at some point, you kind of say like, it's hard to spend another couple $100s after a third time of these things, being vandalized by the public. While it's not very common, I know again, myself and at least several other businesses had it happen last year. So again, my perspective would be, what Peter has said, and have it be an acknowledgement in the permitting process. And then, just as a city, when we are enforcing those standards, that there's a little bit of grace to understand that everyone is trying to do their best. And a lot of, restaurateurs are also not horticulturists, or maybe don't have the best green thumbs. So just making sure that we're giving, again, some grace within those things.
Thank you so much, Assistant Mayor Kelly. That's actually very helpful, and I think that that's important for us and everyone to remember, that I have heard reports of people having their flowers pulled out late at night, so.
Yeah, and one, I guess, from a business standpoint, an approach they could take, if they were having trouble maintaining those because people are vandalizing them, they could just remove them altogether, I suppose, which is, not what we want. It would be nice to see all the plants out there. It really adds to it, I think, to have a little planted area. But maybe that's a solution. It'll be, obviously, we wouldn't stop them from removing the planters, and we could work with them if they kept getting vandalized, talk with them about it. I'm sure that would come up. But I think if we put something in that if planters are installed, they shall be planted. I think even to say and maintained, and then a second sentence, even though it's redundant a little bit, applicant agrees to maintain all plants and vegetation in planters in their outdoor dining encumbrance area. If we need to wordsmith it, Jane can help me with that, but I think that will achieve what we're trying to achieve.
I think that sounds fine. And the other thing too is that in the OpenGov system, we can put comments in. So for instance, if Jason Page goes out and someone says, to the assistant mayor's point that I was vandalized, we can note the file. There's a way to document that as well, so that the applicant knows, we checked, but yet there's this reason why the plants haven't been maintained or they were vandalized, and so that's kind of nice to have that capability in our OpenGov system.
Yeah.
Does this sound like a reasonable solution to everyone else on the committee?
I was just wondering how many planters there are. We maintain plants at Prescott Park. Could the city take over the maintenance? But that's not a question we can answer today.
And I think that goes to data collecting after this season too. I think, as Councilor Cook pointed out, people don't like the barriers, the look of them. People are complaining about the plants, and then the question is, how many people are complaining about the plans? Is it one very vocal person, or is it lots of people who are coming through, you know? And so it's a policy decision as to what we're going to expend as a city on, you know, the outdoor dining, because I think it is a draw, certainly, right? And particularly this winter's been really tough for a lot of restaurants. So that's something the city's very aware of. And so, you know, it's that balancing, you know, that balancing test that we always engage in.
And I could add something to that too. I think with the Market Square Master Plan work that's going on, there's opportunities for making areas not need barriers, fewer areas needing barriers. I mean, it's not going to happen overnight.
True.
But the design guidelines will be there, so when a road project comes in or another project comes in, they'll be upgraded and there'll be less, you know, the goal in the long run is fewer of those barriers in the street, but to make the businesses work, before a sidewalk can be widened or something like that, it's the only way they can really do it safely. But even then, you know, the leading edge of the barrier has to be there, but it doesn't necessarily have to be along this business. So like Massimo was able to put a platform up instead of a barrier along the side, and that gains them, you know, 2 feet of a footprint on one of those Jersey barriers. So people are, I think, over time, as Councilor Tabor said, they're investing in their spaces, and they're coming up with ways to make them more usable. So we'll see some improvements hopefully over time.
And, you know, thanks to Peter and his team working with Massimo and, you know, figuring all that stuff out and getting the right result and explaining all the new rules to everyone, because it's a lot. And but that's one example where working with a restaurant owner, I think really helped.
Yes. Thank you again.
Yeah,
Thank
sure.
you so much. Sorry. Are there any other questions around the outdoor dining design standards? And with that said, are there any questions around the encumbrance permit ordinance? Just making sure that we're okay for this season.
Well, I will be coming forward the next governance with some suggestions on consolidation and edits. I was unable to get to that given the sickness that went through the fourth floor, but we are all back on track, hopefully, and I can at least, what I would like is to maybe get an outline for the committee to consider. This is, you know, can we delete Chapter 8 and, you know, Chapter 6 and put everything in Chapter 5, and here's sort of an outline without the actual language of the ordinances yet, so that I know I'm going in the right direction before I actually make any edits, if that's okay with the committee.
Okay. That seems reasonable. Are we okay for this year implementing it as written? I'm just thinking about timeline and applications coming in and making sure we're not in a position that we're going to change anything that's going to impact those permits.
Certainly not outdoor dining.
Okay.
And certainly not the sidewalks, because we've resolved the table and chairs. So for purposes of outdoor dining, no. Generally, you know, consolidating and costs associated with sort of construction encumbrances, that's sort of a separate category. So I think for purposes of the spring season and outdoor dining, we should be fine.
Okay, good. Any questions from councilors or the assistant mayor? We all set? Okay. Then we will plan on our next meeting having further discussion around encumbrance and consolidating some of the encumbrance ordinances that are in many different places, unfortunately, in our ordinance, which I know can be confusing to everyone who's reading through the ordinance and they think they're in the right place for something that applies to them, and they're really not. There's another ordinance related to what they're asking. So I think that will be very helpful if we start down that process. I don't know if we have a brief update, if we're done with outdoor dining standards. Do we have a brief update on the charter departments and IT? I believe that our
Yes,
deputy
Suzanne is raising her hand.
manager is here to share.
Yeah, I can just give a brief update, which is first that Kelly Harper is pulling together kind of a summary of how her department intersects with both police and school in particular. She'll cover fire too, but there's a lot of course, overlap. So she's just going to put together some bullet points there, just following up on the conversation that briefly touched on the Human Resources Department and kind of who does what, roughly. So that's coming. We just needed a little more time to pull that together, and the parties are sitting down to make sure everyone does agree to the same list of who does what. So that's happening. In addition, there are already conversations and communications back and forth on the IT sort of intersections, again, with city IT and then the various IT elements within school and PD. So that is coming too. That'll probably take a little longer. So I know the committee had talked about 45 to 60 days, and I think just trying to get schedules together, that's the right time frame, but it is moving, and I just wanted to let you know that those conversations are happening and some of the documentation is getting pulled together and in a form that I think will be useful to the committee.
Thank you so much for the update. Does anyone have any questions or comments from that last meeting for the deputy city manager in case during this time frame, just to make sure that we're not missing anything?
I would just love to reiterate that it was great to have everyone at the table at the same time. I thought that was a very useful discussion.
Why don't I, keeping that in mind, maybe when we're ready to report back out with the information that was requested in terms of staffing and some of the programs and software and subscriptions that we are managing in our various elements of city government, I'll see if I can get representatives from the charter departments as well as IT there when we report back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. With that, this might be the shortest meeting of the governance committee in
Amazing.
history. So,
Pick the right one.
Can I,
yes, Councilor Tabor.
I just needed a clarifying question. If we're going to go to the council with encumbrance fees. So does the applicant still have to get a permit for the
Yes.
tables?
And provide insurance.
No fee?
Yes.
Provide
Yeah,
insurance.
provide
Okay.
insurance.
Right, so that requirement doesn't go away. Okay.
All right. So with that said, I don't think there's anyone from the public here for a public comment. As far as announcements go, the only announcement I have is that our next meeting of the governance committee is scheduled for March the 10th. Is that a reasonable timeframe, Attorney Farini, to get back to us?
Sure, because it is an outline with suggestions, and again, it won't be obviously carved in stone. It's just to kind of give some thoughts to it to see what direction you'd want to do and sort of what you want to tackle first. Do you want to do the policies first? Do you want to do the, consolidate the policies, and that kind of dictates the amendments to the ordinances, or whether we do the ordinance kind of meat and potato, a little simpler, and then do the broader policies.
Okay. Would the committee be comfortable if I met with Attorney Farini in the meantime to see if we can develop a little bit of direction of where we can start? So maybe we can tackle the meat of a few of these things on March 10th. Would that be okay with everyone?
We also are meeting on March 24th.
Yes. That is how we're currently scheduled. We won't meet on March 24th if we don't have something to discuss that is urgent, then we don't think we're going to take any action. But especially if we don't have a report back on the IT stuff, because I don't think that it's necessary to meet twice next month if that's the case. But maybe if I meet with Attorney Farini between now and then, and we get we can look at it and decide on general directions, stuff that we can tackle quickly. Maybe there's some things that we can handle on March 10th, and then give further direction, if that works for everyone. Okay. No other announcements? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone.